Hey, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to it. Tuesday, the Michael Dukes Show, broadcasting live across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or translator, and around the world at michaeldukeshow.com on the interwebs. Good morning and welcome to the program. Thanks for coming in and joining us. It is the Michael Dukes Show. How about that? Tuesday edition of the show, and absolutely no tacos for anyone this morning, which is unfortunate because, man, everybody could use a few tacos. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Can you smell what I'm cooking? All right. Welcome back to the program. It is Tuesday, which means today we're going to be doing our weekly deep dive into the good stuff. That's right. We're gonna talk in hour one this morning. We got just a few headlines that we're gonna dive into first, and then we're going to pick it up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, who's going to come on board and chat with us about the weekly top three. Today on the program, on the weekly top three, we're going to cover the budget as it is envisioned for us by the House Finance Committee. Then we're going to take up the latest editorial from the ADN board. Brad is a little bit surprised that he is, in fact, in agreement with the ADN board on their issues with permanent fund investment. And then, finally, we're going to talk about why the State Senate should be focusing on campaign finance reform, at this time. I mean, we're 71 days now into the 71 days into the legislative session. I mean, technically, we should only have 19 more days. But, these folks are going to push it all the way to the limit. 120 days is what they figure they have. So we'll see what goes on here as we get closer to that 90-day mark. Maybe they're going to push for it all to be closed and be shut down by 90 days. I mean, they all want to get back out on the campaign trail. I mean, it's like the thing. They definitely want to be back out there talking about this stuff. All right, so that is that's kind of the first hour of the program. And then in hour two, we're going to be joined by you, because we're going to open up some phone lines and talk with you about some stuff. And then we will be talking with Chris Story in hour two for our weekly life coaching lesson. And we look forward to seeing that. We look forward to talk with him every week. He gives us something to look forward to. And we're looking at that. So where are we? Where we're gonna go? What are we gonna do here this morning? All right, so we're gonna hit some headlines. So that's it for today. We got Chris Story, Brad Keithley. Tomorrow on the program, Kelly Shabaka will be joining us in hour one, and we'll be talking with her. I don't know if you saw the latest. We'll cover this in just a bit, but the latest shows some bean counters got together and shows that she could beat Lisa Murkowski, which is a pleasant surprise for many of us. We'll see how that actually plays out when it's all said and done. But that is the word is that she could potentially beat Lisa Murkowski on this, so that would be fantastic. Okay, Kelly Tshibaka, then Mike Shower. And on Thursday, don't know yet, but I'm sure that we'll have somebody. I don't know where to start. Where do we start here? All right, well, I guess we can start with that. No, we should start with this. Okay, we're going to start with this, which is that the House floor session yesterday came to an abrupt end as Speaker Louise Stutes gavelled in and then immediately called for a recess after she arrived late, by the way. She said in it that she had sent a memo to legislative staff officers earlier in the day stating that all members and staff must wear masks in the House chambers. And there were members in the room who were unmasked, and therefore she was calling for a recess until they complied. The cameras didn't pan over, but according to Must Read Alaska, there were 3 members who were not wearing masks, and that include Representative Ben Carpenter, David Eastman, and Chris Kirka. The Speaker had ordered the Sergeant of Arms to prevent anyone from entering the chamber who was unmasked. The 3 legislators remained in the room because if they left, they wouldn't be allowed to return without properly being face masked. Eastman went on to post what he thought was going on Facebook. He said, and I quote, "The Speaker's made it clear that she considers me a threat to her health based on the personal medical interventions I choose to take or not take. She's incorrect. I'm not a threat. I'm not sick. Unlike the Speaker, I did not attend a floor session while sick last week with COVID, if the reports are to be believed. I do have a documented non-contagious respiratory condition from my time in the military. Even so, I've sacrificed my personal health repeatedly by wearing a mask. In fact, I was the first member of the legislature to wear a mask during legislative business. However, I will not sit by while a fellow member of the legislature is threatened with not being permitted to fulfill their constitutional duty to cast a vote in the legislature because they're not wearing a mask while doing so. There's no constitutional requirement to wear a mask or constitutional authority to prevent a fellow legislator from voting. There is a constitutional requirement that a legislature faithfully discharge their duties as a state legislator. Those duties obviously include the ability to vote." Must Read goes on to talk about the outbreak of COVID that's currently going on in the legislature was identified by Beacon, which is the company is contracted to do the testing. Beacon said that the spread is due to a large number of staffers attending Sham Jam, which is a fundraiser held locally there in Juneau at the Red Dog Saloon, where proceeds are given to a local nonprofit. Mostly Democrats attended the Sham Jam this year. One Republican in the building commented, quote, "People are allowed to not wear masks in the halls, in offices, everywhere but on the floor. The majority wants to slow roll the budget to get extra days of per diem, so they'll make silly rules to blame Republicans for the budget not moving." So, I mean, it just sounds like business as usual down at the Capitol. I mean, that's what it sounds like right now. I mean, at this point, masks, no masks, everything, you're just gonna go ahead and call the whole thing off because a few people aren't wearing masks. I mean, they got plexi, they got this, they got all this stuff. I mean, but if you're not wearing a mask, then that's it for you. I don't know. I'm just so over all of that stuff. So over it all. So that's the first story for you to chew on this morning. You could think about that and grind through that a little bit. The second story, I alluded to this a minute ago. Kelly Tshibaka, who, of course, is challenging Lisa Murkowski, now has come out and said that according to her pollster, which is Signal is the name of her pollster, that she has a clear shot at winning in the general, in the ranked choice voting in November. According to Signal, which, by the way, Signal is a reputable firm that conducts many, many polls, and it caters to Republican clients. The New York Times rated Signal as the #1 most accurate polling firm in 2018. In the same year, the survey company 538 said Signal was one of the top polling firms, And in 2020, Signal called the most races correctly of any Republican shop in the nation. So they've got a track record to back this up. This is not just some guy in his basement cooking the books and bringing it up. So according to Signal, Chewbacca carries 84% of the Republican vote and leads with both men and women. On the final ranked choice results, because they plugged it all into their thing and they came up with it, she will prevail by a 2% margin. Chewbacca trounces Murkowski with both Trump Republicans and traditional Republicans, and that a strong majority of undecided voters have an unfavorable opinion of Murkowski. It's kind of interesting. They go through the whole thing with the jungle primary, how that works, how the ranked choice voting system works, and in everything else. Basically, they broke it down and said in all the scenarios tested, Signal says that Chewbacca wins even after the ranked choice ballot goes through its machined calculated redistribution of votes. They said part of the reason why is that according to the pollsters, 87% of Alaskan Republicans hold an unfavorable view of Murkowski. Independents, the independent voters, prefer a Republican be in the office by 13%. And that party intensity, I don't know exactly what party intensity is, but it sounds intense, is much stronger for the Republicans than Democrats. It's 86 to 58%. And this was based on a poll conducted 2 weeks ago through phone, text, and email by Signal. So this is interesting. I mean, to me, this is an interesting breakdown. And I'm sure that Kelly Chewbacca will talk about this on Wednesday as well. But again, it doesn't mean that you go weary in well-doing. I still think that Murkowski, even with all this discussion and everything else, I think Murkowski still has a favorable chance of winning simply because she's the business as usual and there's a lot of Democrats who are going to vote for her and everything else. It's going to be interesting. Let's just put it that way. It will be an interesting race, but it's good to see at least some of the polling is showing that there are some positives and potentials in favor of Chewbacca when it's all said and done. Although, again, you got to be a little cautious when you throw this kind of stuff out there, especially so early. You don't want people to get complacent. You don't want them to not show up at the voting booth. So we'll see how that covers it here as we go through. Here's some interesting stuff. The race for the House seat left vacant by Don Young that thing's about to get real, man. There are a bunch of folks. And we talked about Al Gross yesterday. It is confirmed now. His campaign has basically said, yes, he is going to file before Friday. So we're going to see Al Gross. But yesterday, in a surprise move, John Coghill came out of the weeds and signed up. John Coghill said that after much prayer, I have decided that I can't not do it. Because, of course, he knows better than you how you should live your life, right? I mean, he knows better than you how you should do that. So he's filed already. Although, and I didn't realize how old John Coghill was, although he is well-liked, he could be starting his congressional career a little late at the age of 75. He would not have a long runway to develop political seniority for Alaska. So maybe it's time to leave it to the younger fellows or ladies, as the case may be. In addition to Coghill and Gross, there have been a plethora of candidates, including Greg Brailsford, William Bill Hibbler III, Robert Bob Lyons, J.R. Myers, and Stephen Wright. All have now signed up to file for the special primary, along with Nick Begich and Christopher Constant. And I got to say, Christopher Constant is probably not feeling great about the fact that Al Gross has jumped into the race. That's definitely going to siphon some votes off of him. But, I mean, where does it go? This is going to be interesting. I mean, Dr. Bear Killer could be coming in, and he could be a real threat to Chris Constant. Does Coghill's name recognition help against baggage? Does his age hurt? I mean, I don't know. And boy, wait till you see if Sarah Palin jumps in. I don't think it's going to happen, but if it did, imagine. Anyway, The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Brad Keithley's up next.
Our light, our guide, and our trusted friend.
Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Good morning, my pretties. And your little dog, too. How are you doing this morning? How are you doing this morning? I mean, I can't even imagine. Can you imagine? Can you imagine John Coghill? I'm just not, I mean, wow. John Coghill. We worked so hard to get rid of him the first time, and then we're going to put him back in. I mean, wouldn't that just be, it feels painful. It feels, feels bad, man. Yeah. Feels bad, man. All right, let me get Brad lined up first before we get too far along here. Let me get Brad on the line here. And oh Lord, too many windows here. What am I looking for? Here we go. This is the one I'm looking for, right? Oh, always got to search for the shortcut. Here we go. Dun, 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 dun. No? Yes. Weekly top 3. Here we go. Look at that. I got it. Finally was able to pull the Zoom link out of the ether. I feel so good about that. All right. Just launch it. For the love of God. All right. Here we go. It's working. All right. So what are some of you saying this morning? Voting for Coghill would be a desperate reach. Why vote for him to hold office at the federal level when he was fired at the state level? Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And then on top of that, you've got Al Gross, who lost his run for Senate and then went back apparently to Petersburg and ran for the local hospital board and couldn't win that either. Guy couldn't be dog catcher right now, I guess. So anyway, some interesting stuff. Looks like we were able to bring Brad onto the program. Are you with us, Brad? Brad, are you there? I could see my microphone, but I don't hear Brad saying anything on his end. Brad, that's you, Brad. You. Okay, Brad's going to figure it out here. We got about 3 minutes here before I can see his lips moving, but I can't hear him. All right. Brad's going to work on it here for a second while we get that squared away. Hey,
oh, there we go.
There you go.
There's another button I got to hit.
Yeah, there's a button. It's that mute button, that damn mute button every time. All right. All right, well, you all ready this morning? You want to comment on the fact that Coghill jumped back into the race real quick before we get to the top 3?
I like your long, not a long runway to developing seniority. You're going to have so much fun during this congressional cycle.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can't take credit for those. That was right out of must read, but I mean, it's the truth. I forgot how old he is. He's 75 years old. I mean, it's not like he can build up any seniority in the next 10 years. He'd be lucky to be out of the puppy pound by 10 years from now, if that's the case. But I think like I said, this is why I've been arguing for years that Don Young should have been, grooming a successor, or at least training up some of his aides or his interns to be able to at least have a potential to run so that they understand the ins and outs of what's going on over there. but too much ego in that. So
I suspect we're going to hear Josh Revac claim that he learned at the knee of Don Young. I mean, Revac was an aide for Young at one time before he came back to Alaska, and I suspect we're going to hear a lot of that.
Both Revac and Begich had been promised apparently to be heir apparents, both of them at one point.
Everybody's been promised. Yeah,
that's exactly that's the ego talking there, I think. So of Don Young doing what he did. All right, well, hold the line, Brad. We're going to jump back into it, folks. Please like and share this video. Like and follow the show page. Let's continue ahead here. Brad Keithley is our guest. It is the Michael Duke Show. Don't forget to hit subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube as well. Let's do this thing. Here we go. All right, welcome back to the program. Continuing now with the weekly top three. Brad Keithley joins us via Zoom this morning, to talk about all the things that are important. The three things we're going to dive into: the budget, the permanent fund investing, and campaign contribution, campaign finance reform. Those are going to be the big three things. But of course, the most burning question that we have this morning is, Brad, where's your mask? Okay, because we really need to all make sure that we have our masks on this morning, right? So that we're all safe, Brad.
I didn't realize the show had developed a remote mask policy.
Yes, we have a mask man. It is my show, so everyone who's listening is wearing a mask right now. You should be wearing a mask. I don't have to because it's my show, but you have to make it happen.
Me, who's
I don't want to mess up my mustache.
Miles away from anybody else.
Yeah, right, I know. Now. I don't care if you're in a room all by yourself, Brad. It's the example that counts. Okay, that's what I'm saying. All right. Well, before we get too far off on a tangent, let's talk about. Let's talk about the weekly top three. Number one is the budget. We went over this yesterday. Some kind of astonishing things coming out of this, including this $532 million proposed by Sarah Rasmussen. Now, here we have monies that we're not obligated to pay all at once, that we were paying at the statutory amount, that we were not paying any interest on, that was just kind of, we were paying it, we're 6 years away from payoff, so to speak. And all of a sudden, because there's a surplus, and apparently, according to the ADN, the fact that she understood that the PFDers were coming to the table, she wanted to get that money off the table. Sarah Rasmussen has proposed that we just pay it all off now, even though we could hold on to that money, time spent, investment, time on return, all the other things you say from holding money. But instead, we're just going to blurp it all out. That was one of the biggest shocks to me.
You remember when Scoop Jackson was a senator from the state of Washington, and he was called the senator from Boeing for all of the various things he did during his career to help promote Boeing. Right. Being a boy from Everett, Washington, he wanted to help the hometown company, but he was called the senator from Boeing. I think Sarah may be on her way to being called the senator from oil. Yeah, that was a shocker to see her propose that.
No, and I guess that to blatantly admit in the article that, well, she understood that there was going to be permanent fund folks who wanted to come in, and if there was money left over, so she wanted to take that money off the table, so it couldn't be used for the permanent fund. Which, wow.
What's really surprising is the votes some of the votes she got for that proposal. I mean, Kelly Merrick, you sort of understand, but Andy Josephson, who's my representative from the district I live in, who claims to be, looking out for working Alaska families, who claims to be, focused on keeping working Alaska families up and running, he voted for it. And basically his theory, as I understand it, his theory was, well, we're going to keep hearing about this anyway, so might as well get it off the table, and maybe we can go on to something else.
Wait a second. It's why can't you use that? Why can't you use that philosophy for the PFD? We keep hearing about it. We should just get it done and get it off the table. I mean, right? That's been an issue longer than the oil and gas tax credits. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that just flays me.
No, it's an odd vote. I was surprised. I mean, there's been various layers on the oil and gas tax credits. The administration proposed a certain amount, and then oil and gas tax credits are tied to oil revenues in any given year. So as oil prices have gone up, there was a change in House Finance to reflect the increased credits that are due this year as a result of oil prices going up. That I fully understood. But then for Sarah to take it the step beyond, the senator or the representative from oil to take it a step beyond and say, oh heck, let's just throw all the money in the pot. That's just I can't explain that.
Right. I mean, we were fulfilling the statutory obligation. It seems like let's just keep doing that, and we have uses for that money, like i.e. paying the full PFD to begin with. Or at least, I guess paying back the CBR. There are many things that I would rather do than just give it out when we could just pay it off at the statutory amount and have it done in the next 5 or 6 years. It just doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
There's one thing that I'm not clear about yet, and this may explain part of it. They may not be paying it out this year. They could be, but they may be just putting that additional amount in the oil and gas credit fund. And have it there for when it's due in future years. It's another way of stuffing money into a fund and doing it for savings. They're doing that with the with forward funding. House Finance is proposing to do that with forward funding K through 12, and that may be what they're doing with the oil and gas.
Wait, you mean they're dedicating funds? You mean they're saying that these funds can only be? Wait a second. I think that there's a little clause in the Constitution that says, oh, no, I'm sorry, they're designating the funds, so that makes it okay. I mean, what?
Yeah, well, in any event, it's surprising to, I was surprised. Even I was surprised. I mean, somebody who's followed oil and gas for as many years as I have and understand the ins and outs of that oil and gas credit fund. I was surprised that it was just sort of, hey, we got a bunch of money. Let's just go ahead and just, get it all out of here.
All right. That was the biggest surprise. Of course, they want to forward fund education, which again, I don't know how you get around the whole dedicated funds thing, but they're going to do it for 2 years, $1.2 billion plus a $57 million bonus to schools, even though they're currently sitting on something like $800 million in COVID money that they haven't spent yet. But they're poor, pitiful me. They get another $57 million. The university gets a big bump as well. What else? There's just so many things that are in this bill, and of course, nothing about a PFD, nothing about the capital or anything else. This is a $7 billion budget over the $4.3 billion budget from last year, and they still haven't even addressed the capital issues. I mean, wow.
Yeah, it's really skyrocketing. The $7 billion is pumped up by the forward funding. It's pumped up by the $1.2 billion in forward funding. So when you take that out, that number comes down a little bit, but it still comes down to $5 billion against a fairly steady $4.5 billion that we had been running throughout. I mean, the Senate's has been yet to heard from on this issue. The House floor, there's going to be amendments on the House floor, although those will probably increase spending. And the governor's been yet to be heard from on the issue. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal about Alaska a couple of days ago, and the governor was quoted as saying that he doesn't like the forward funding, and indicated that he may be inclined to veto that. So maybe that comes back out. It'll be interesting to see if he doesn't like that and he vetoes it, what he does with the oil and gas tax credits. But,
right.
There's a lot of steps remaining, but House Finance has certainly set the incline on an upward direction.
Well, again, even subtracting the $1.2 billion for forward funding, it still puts us at $5.8 billion. That's still a significant increase over last year, and it just shows. I can't remember whose axiom it is or what law it is, but basically, government will consume every available resource and then some, if given the chance. And that seems to be the modus operandi here. Again, with no discussion on paying a full PFD or fixing the PFD statute or doing any of that, just continuing to basically, I mean, they got 199 and some of the other things, but there's nothing that's really serious that's got a chance, I think, at this point of really passing or making a difference.
Yeah, they had a vote on a full PFD. I mean, that Neil Foster proposed an amendment that would have paid a full PFD. It got defeated 7-4. It was an odd vote. It got defeated 7-4. And then the amendment to go to POMV 50/50, the governor's proposal, got defeated 8-3.
Right.
So somebody voted for. I haven't gone back to figure out who that was, but somebody voted for a full PFD, then voted against POMV 50/50.
I'm waiting for there to be. Yesterday we had Kevin McCabe on the program, and he talked about the amendment process and everything else, and he said, yeah, there's going to be a lot of talk about a full PFD over the next few days. I mean, I would like to see a vote on the, I don't think it'll ever happen. It'll probably get procedurally killed, but I would love to see an amendment on the floor that basically said, here's your full PFD. Let's put that in and see what the actual votes on the floor is. I don't know how strident the binding caucus is on the House side, but it sure would be nice to see those members get a chance to actually vote their conscience on it and then have to stick by their votes since we're coming into an election season.
Oh, I think we'll see that amendment. I mean, we've seen it in previous years. And what happens with that amendment is you pick up Neil and you may pick up Guarantar from the House majority, but then you lose Bart LeBon, Steve Thompson off of the House minority, and you sort of end up where you started by the time you wash that out. I mean, it'll be interesting to see it come up on the floor. I don't think they can strike it down procedurally. It'll be interesting to see it come up on the floor and where people land. But you've got to understand that you've got the top 20%, the establishment, the business Republicans in the House Minority Caucus that will vote to cut the PFD. Have always voted to cut the PFD.
Give us your final thoughts here on the budget as you watched it come out. What are you thinking as you look at this, and what does it mean going forward?
Well, the trajectory's up. I mean, the spending levels are up, and House Finance sort of set a bar for what they want to do. We have not yet heard from Burt over on Senate Finance side. As you pointed out, we don't have a capital number yet, and I am certain that Burt and others on the on the Senate side are going to have their own peculiar little niches that they want to put money in. So we're a long way away from the end of the process, but House Finance has set the trajectory as up and up in significant ways in terms of, as you pointed out, in terms of the oil and gas tax credits, additional university funding, additional K-12 funding, various savings accounts starting to be restuffed. I mean, they appropriated money for the higher education fund that had been swept by the governor. They voted to put money back in that. And it's not only, Michael, it's not only FY23 that's getting affected. They put $220 million, I think, in the supplemental for FY22. I mean, that's part of the trick,
right?
Is when you want to keep adding money in there, you do it not only in the next fiscal year that you're dealing with the budget on, you do it in the supplemental for the budget year you've got, and they put $220 million in the supplemental. So the trajectory's up. The question now is whether the House floor adds more to it. And when it gets over to the Senate, how Burt treats it when it gets over there.
All right. Let's get a quick tease on number 2, which is the fact that, shockingly enough, you agree with something that was written by the ADN editorial board, and it has to do with permanent fund investing.
Yeah, I don't know what it says when the ADN editorial board and I come out with statements in the same direction in the same week. Last week on the show, I talked about the in-state investment policy of the permanent fund and my concerns about that and my opposition to that. Over the weekend, the ADN editorial board came out with an op-ed that's virtually the same. They had a few more bells and whistles to it. but virtually the same position. So both of us are expressing concern about the in-state investment program that the Permanent Fund has set up. We'll talk about that more after the break.
All right, Brad Keithley is our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We're going to continue with him here in just a moment. The weekly top three continues. The Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
It's the Michael Dukes Show.
Why not take a quick break?
Be right back. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, that's what happens when I need to push the right button, and I didn't push the right button. Don't tell anybody. All right. Okay, Brad Keithley, our guest. I saw a question. Donna asked a question in the chat room. Does Brad know who owns the credits? Who owns the oil and gas tax credits now? I know that they did. I know there was some horse swapping and trading, some of the majors and some of the minors. They swapped some stuff back and forth. Who actually owns the credits now? Do you know by any chance, Brad?
Largely finance companies. I mean, largely the oil companies that are entitled to them have traded them off to finance companies as in satisfaction of debts that they had run up. So it's not so much the oil companies anymore. There may be. I mean, I will try to go back into this because I'm a little curious about why Sarah was so insistent on it. Her ties are more to the oil and gas service industry than they are directly to the oil and gas industry. And it may be that some oil and gas service companies are holding some of those credits in satisfaction for services that they render to the oil and gas companies. But it's not so much the oil and gas companies that develop them during the course of the program. It's the finance companies that sort of have helped them survive over the period that hold those credits now.
What is? I'm sorry. I'm reading some of the chats here. It is funny. You were talking about the swapping of votes. You know, you'll get a Neil Foster and a Guarantar come across on a full PFD vote. And I think it's almost like it feels so choreographed. Like the vote comes up and they are like, well, we've got to show our constituents that we're involved here. So you vote yes, and we'll vote no, so that we can cover or backwards the other way around. We'll vote yes, and you vote no, so you can cover us, so we can cover the spread, but we can go back to our constituencies and say, look, we voted for you. No, I mean, how much of that is just like full choreography?
Well, it to a large extent, but the real dancer in that choreography is Sarah Rasmussen. I mean, she will vote. She will count heads and vote for the PFD if the PFD is going to lose. I mean, it's sort of like L.B. Gray Jackson does over in the Senate, right? Right. I'm for the PFD. I'm for the PFD. I'm for the PFD. Oops, my vote counts. Now I'm against the PFD.
Right. Yeah, we saw that last year.
That way. In fact, I think Sarah may have voted for the full PFD in House Finance. That will give her a talking point in her campaign this year. I mean, in prior years she voted against it, but she may have counted a vote. So yeah, there's a lot of choreography that goes on, and we'll see that on the floor. It's not Thompson and Laban. They're not choreographed on this. I mean, they're going to vote against it. They've against the full PFD. They've always done that. They've said they're going to do it. They're going to follow through with it. But Sarah is the one that dances around a little bit.
It is interesting to watch. Spending is up? No, really? Yeah. And that's it. You know, I think you hit on the thing. One of my favorite things to point out every year, and has been for the last 20 years, once I started figuring out the machinations, was always the supplemental budget, right? Because they'll always go back. And, of course, if they reference spending that year, so let's go back 3 years, and spending that year was, pick a number, $4.5 billion, $4.6 billion. Nobody ever references the supplemental budget that comes out 6-8 months later near the end of the year that says, oh, we got to stuff another $200 or $300 million into there. That's never factored in because all they do is here's what the budget that was passed, not what was actually spent. And I think that is the shell game that gets me every time. Look at our spending trend. We've done so well, 4.1, 4.3, when it's really 4.5, 4.8, 5.1, because they're coming back later and they're supplementing it at the end. And nobody really pays attention to the supplemental budgets at the end. I mean, nobody's really, no newspaper is focusing on, well, this is what they passed, but then they had to increase it by 5 or 6% in the supplemental budget at the end of the year. It's astonishing to me that nobody catches that.
Yeah, usually there's about a $50 million supplemental. So when you do projections of where your budget's going to go, you usually add about $50 million to that budget to account for the supplemental. And but this year it's 200 and some odd million dollars. So that the proposal coming out of House Finance at least is 200 and some odd million dollars. So there's some stuffing going on in there. And you're exactly right. I mean, it's a great place to stuff it because everybody focuses on the next fiscal year. They're looking at all of the bells and whistles that got added to the next fiscal year. And you just sort of, just stuff a little bit in that back one. And people don't pay attention to it. I'm a little surprised, I guess. I mean, I went to the supplemental first because I wondered what they were doing.
Right. Hold on, Brad. We're going to jump back into it. The Michael Duke Show. Please like and share this video. Like and follow the show page. Hit subscribe. Ring the bell on YouTube. Let's get to it. Here we go. All right, continuing now with Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top three. We're coming in to talk about the the permanent fund investment, and the fact that Brad and the AD editorial board seem to be sharing a brain for a week or so, which is a little terrifying to think about. Brad, what's going on here?
Well, the editorial is entitled "The Alaska Permanent Fund's Investment Mistake," and if you haven't read it, it's worth for those interested in this issue. It's certainly worth going back. It is a soup to nuts takedown of the Permanent Fund Corp's Alaska specific investment policy or allocated Alaska investment policy, and raises all of the issues that I've been concerned about, which is favoritism to some Alaska industries over others. The concern you raised on last week's show, which is, what happens if we have one of these investments that they've made, or an investment they haven't made yet, but we start losing a lot of employees, the business gets in trouble. Can the investment fund really disengage from that business, or, is there a lot of pressure for the investment fund to go in and help support that business? And so it's a great editorial for raising issues. It also did something that I hadn't seen before. It also sort of brought one issue out of the woodwork that some are using to defend the Permanent Fund Corporation's policy. And basically that defense is, look, we don't have a lot of capital in Alaska. The defense is we don't have a lot of capital in Alaska. We don't have a lot of capital expertise in Alaska. We don't have a lot of venture capital firms. We don't have a lot of venture capital here. And so the defense of this policy is what we're really doing with that policy. In part, what we're really doing with this policy is we're building up venture capital expertise, and we're building up venture capital to be used for Alaska industries. And isn't that good? The defense goes, isn't that good that we're injecting this new capital and we're attracting this new expertise to Alaska? Well, that proves the issue that I'm concerned about, which is we're using this money to pick winners and losers and to build up an Alaska industry that otherwise isn't being built up through the private sector. There's not a sense of a need for it in the private sector.
Right.
So, I mean, even the best defense that I've seen thus far for why this policy is good policy from the standpoint of the Alaska proves the point that I'm concerned about, and proves the point that the ADN and others are concerned about. We are creating artificially. We are using the permanent fund to create artificially business investment and business activity in Alaska that the private sector otherwise doesn't think is needed in Alaska, and we're propping that up, or we're supporting it, or we're creating it through the use of permanent fund assets. I just think this whole dedicated to Alaska sector policy that the permanent fund has adopted is going in the wrong direction, and I just think it sends us down a road that has no good endings at it. Even if at the end of the road, what it does is produce a return that is in fact commensurate with the returns we could have gotten elsewhere, we've run a bunch of risks going down that road that at some point will go bad on us. And all we've done is we've gotten returns that are commensurate with what we could have done by not going down that road in the first place. Yeah. So I don't see any justification for this. And as I say, even the justification that's come out of the woodwork because of the ADN editorial, I don't think has any validity.
No, and again, I think it hits on the key point of what you were just talking about, which is government intervention in the free marketplace. If there was a demand for that, private business would step up and private investors would step up and do it. The only reason they're doing it is because it's free government money, right? And then, of course, it takes more free government money to prop it up, and that goes on and on and on. And it may develop a return in the end, but at what risk and at what cost, when the money could be put in something else that is more solid, more stable, and doesn't, I guess, monkey with the free market at that point.
Right, and we just and it creates all sorts of needs to keep track of what it's doing, to put governors on what it's doing, to keep an eye on what it's doing, that we don't need when the investment's being made elsewhere. Yes, there is a risk for conflict of interest. Yes, you could invest in a corporation in New York which is run by the brother-in-law of the guy doing the investing. Yes, there's the risk of that, but the risk of that is a lot lower and a lot easier to look after than the risk of the shenanigans that could go on in Alaska with the brother-in-laws are a lot closer in Alaska with those sorts of investments and those sorts of policies. So it's as I say, the one justification that I've heard now for why this is a good thing still doesn't sell it to me. It's just another. It's sort of the argument is our industry is better. The venture capital industry is better. It's important, and so you ought to favor us. Yeah. Don't worry about these other things. You ought to favor us. So it's just it's picking winners and losers.
Which again, government picking winners and losers, they don't really have a great track record on that. Let's just put it that way. All right, well, let's take a look then at number 3. Again, you can go out and read the article. I posted it up in the chat room for the opinion piece from the ADN editorial board. I don't know if anybody outside of this is listening to that, but they should be paying attention to it for sure. All right, but let's talk about the third big one, which is that the state Senate should be paying attention to campaign finance reform and campaign finance laws, which the House has been paying attention to. If you remember earlier on, APOC basically lifted all limits for contributions on candidates in an effort to conform with the court ruling, and left it to the legislature basically to take care of. The House has taken it up, but the Senate so far doesn't seem interested at this point. Brad?
Yeah, and that's troublesome to me. I mean, I understand. So the House passed a campaign reform bill that would put limits on contributions in state and local races, would expand the disclosure requirements, sort of reinstate the system we had before the Ninth Circuit started monkeying with it, and it passed the House with significant Republican opposition. And I understand the Republicans had concerns with it, had concerns with that bill. But I don't think anybody should have concerns with putting limits on campaign donations. I mean, we have a top 20% problem in this state already that shows up with the permanent fund, and shows up with things like with the permanent fund corporation's investment policy. We have a money influence problem in this state already, and I think it's foolish of any party, either party, to not want to put limits back on campaign donations. I don't know why I mean, as you and I have discussed on the show a lot, Alaska is a cheap date for outside money and for campaign donations, and I don't think that Republicans should feel that they're somehow insulated from that they'll be the winners of outside big money coming into to campaigns, and that it will work to their advantage somehow. We saw with ballot measure 2, with the ranked choice voting, we saw the influence of big money coming into this state. We saw with ballot measure 1 with the oil money that came into the state, the influence that big money can have on elections in this
dark
state.
money.
We've sort of been insulated from that.
Dark money.
Yeah, we've sort of been insulated from that with legislative races because of the campaign limits. But now, if we're going to take those off, we're going to see it pop up in those as well. And it doesn't necessarily work to the Republicans' advantage.
No,
so
it's not.
The Democrats saw the problem in the House. I think the Republicans ought to see the problem in the Senate. If they want to make changes to the House bill, have at it. But we should end up with campaign limits, with campaign donation limits at the end of this legislative session.
Ballot measure 2, about $7 million were spent on the pro side. With ballot measure 1, the oil and gas tax, it was just over, I think, $5 million was spent. So again, overall, not a whole lot of money in the grand scheme of things, especially for outside interest groups who've got deep pockets. A few $1 million to sway a whole state seems like a pretty good investment when it's all said and done. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Brad, thanks for coming on board.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we are out of time for this hour. We got more coming up. Hour 2 dead ahead. Chris Story will be joining us. We'll take some phone calls after the top of the hour. During the top here, we'll talk with Brad a bit in the break, and then we'll come back with your phone calls. Hour 2 dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Well, and it's getting pretty obvious, Brad, to me. You can look at simply look at what's going on, for example, in the Anchorage Assembly races. You're seeing amounts of money in there that you would never have seen in the past. I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in a local race for a local, essentially, city council. I mean, it's a borough assembly or muni assembly, but I mean, you're seeing hundreds of thousands of dollars. And of course, gubernatorial races now running into the millions and millions of dollars. If they take the cap off that, and again, it only took $5 million to get ballot measure 1 passed, and only took $7 million to get ballot measure number 2 passed, which is a drop in the bucket for many of these, legal and political groups out there and PACs and everything else. It doesn't take much with the number of people we have in this state.
Yeah, exactly right, Michael. I mean, people argue that, well, Citizens United is the core of the problem. As long as it exists, PACs can have unlimited amounts of money and they can spend that in state races. So what's the problem with giving it to individual candidates? Well, the problem is that it influences individual candidates getting those money, that money for themselves, influences them, I think, in my experience, a lot more than a PAC supporting them. If you've got somebody who's sent you a check for $100,000 in your campaign, and you've received that and you've put that into your campaign, you're going to listen to that person a lot more, frankly, going forward, that person a lot more than you're going to listen to the PAC that happened to support you in that campaign. Yes, you're going to take the PAC's phone calls, but you're not going to have the same connection to that money, to the source of that money that you do if you get it directly into your campaign. Plus, PACs can't coordinate with campaigns if they're engaged in independent expenditure. PACs can't coordinate with campaigns, and I think that layer is another layer of protection against whatever the PAC's doing later influencing the candidate. If somebody gives you a check for $100,000 in your individual legislative campaign, your gubernatorial campaign, and you can spend that yourself, it creates a lot closer connection with the source of the funds. So it's there. The fact that PACs can do it, I don't think is a defense to why we shouldn't have limits on state funding as well. The governor said that he's in favor of unlimited funds. I think that's a strike against the governor, not in favor of the governor. Is he concerned he can't raise funds from individual Alaskans? Does he need unlimited funds in order to be able to depend on one or two donors to be able to run his campaign? I think that says bad things about the governor that he's saying that.
What do you think about Schrage's proposal for the $2,000 limit with an adjustment for inflation? I think every 5 or 10 years. I think it's 10 years actually. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that individual component, I'm not tied to. I mean, I'd be fine with another number. I'd be fine with adjusting for inflation at a more rapid rate. To me, the important thing is to have limits, to not allow. I mean, if the difference is between 2,000 on an election basis adjusted for inflation and 2,500 or 3,000 or 3,500, I'm not going to go to war over that. But the difference is between 2,000 or 2,500 or 3,000 and 100,000. That's a huge difference.
Right.
And that to me is what we're talking about here. We're not talking. We shouldn't get caught up and let this whole thing drop because of a dispute about whether it ought to be 2,000 or 2,500 or 3,000 or 35. We shouldn't let that be the thing that kills protecting against the $100,000 donation.
Good point. I'm going to ask you to pivot quickly here because Sean brings up something that I don't think you and I have talked about yet. There's been a bulk email release from the Permanent Fund Corp, and it shows extensive political consultation and personal connections and alliances between von Imhoff and Angela Rodell. What are your thoughts on that here? I got about less than 2 minutes, but can you give me a quick synopsis of your thoughts on that?
Well, it reflects the friendship they had, and it reflects the alliance they had. I mean, Natasha was opposed to PFDs. Angela was the facing court for the Permanent Fund Corporation during the Milikowski challenge to Governor Walker's veto. I think Angela has had the personal problems with personal issues with the PFDs as well, and so that alliance with von Imhoff doesn't surprise me. I mean, there are a lot of reasons to have been concerned about Angela. That is the fact that she talked to Natasha is a very small one to me.
But doesn't it reflect back now on this witch hunt investigation that Natasha is spearheading in the committee where she's getting the subpoenas and everything else? I mean, doesn't it prove more the politicization of this than anything else in your mind?
Yeah, probably so. But I think Alaskans deserve. Yes, we're gonna figure out who did my friend did. Yes, it did sort of explains
right.
that. But I think Alaskans deserve an answer to why Angela was fired. In any event, again, I'm not the biggest offender of Angela. I think she went too far in arguing against PFD cuts. So she will claim she never did that, but I think she did. I think there were a lot of reasons to be concerned about Angela. But I think we need to understand why the Permanent Fund Corporation terminated her. I think Alaskans deserve an answer to that. Just like, if the governor fired a secretary or a commissioner of natural resources, which some governors have done.
Right.
I think Alaskans deserve an answer to why we're doing that, because it's a big part of our government.
Right.
And the Permanent Fund Corporation is similarly a big part of our government.
Brad, thank you so much for coming on board. As always, it's a pleasure to speak with you. We appreciate it, my friend.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Folks, we're jumping back into it here. The Michael Duke Show continues. We've got more coming up. Brad Keithley, our guest, Chris Story coming up right here. Don't go anywhere.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, baby, across the world, across the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com, and around the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station, and or translator. It is the Michael Dukes Show, broadcasting live as always. Don't forget, you can always, of course, pick us up on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch TV as well with a simulcast every morning. And, of course, don't forget, podcasts are available every morning right after the show. And you can subscribe on your favorite podcast device or podcast program, CastBox, Stitcher, iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you find it. It'll come in there. All right. So hour 2 of the program, we're just finishing up. Brad Keithley was with us here, and he laid out some interesting things. And I'm going to open up the phone lines for this segment. If you would like to sound off on anything that Brad was bringing up, and if you've got some quibbles or things that you would like to take issue with, we'd love to hear you this morning. Here's the phone number, 907-433-3150, 907-433-3150, the Pivot Tel call-in line, and that is powered by our friends at Pivot Tel and Satellite West. I would love to, I'd love to hear from you this morning here as we get ready to do it. Chris Story, the man from Homer, will be joining us in the second segment of the program here, about 15 minutes from now, and he'll be sharing with us some life tips, some positivity, some PMA, and life-affirming stuff. That's all coming up here in just a few moments. But since I just mentioned Satellite West as the sponsors of the program, and we want to say thank you to them for sponsoring the program because, hey, they help me come in here. They put cream in my coffee every morning and make this whole thing worth it. We want to say thank you to them and to the newest sponsors from Satellite West, the Bivy Stick. Now, you're like, what the heck is a Bivy Stick? B-I-V-Y, like bivouac. The Bivy Stick. What is it? Well, it's a fancy little doodad that connects to your phone and basically turns your regular cell phone into a satellite communications device. It's that easy. It's about half the size of your cell phone. You tether it with Bluetooth. You download the app. And now all of a sudden, you can send text messages. You can send emails to your friends, your loved ones, your families, no matter where you are in the world. It doesn't matter where you are. You can send a text or an email to anyone. In addition to that, it has the mapping feature in it. Obviously, it's got all the maps from wherever you are around the world, and it allows you to drop a pin or ping them to tell people, I am here, right? So if you are a hiker, a biker, snow machiner, world traveler, jungle explorer, archaeologist in search of the Holy Grail or or the Ark of the Covenant, you could use this bivy stick to be able to tell people, hey, I'm okay, because it's got a little check-in button that when you mash it, it sends a pre-done message which says whatever you want it to say. But basically, it's like, hey, I'm okay, and here's where I am, dropping a pin. And it's also got the little red emergency button. You'll flip the thing back and you push the button, and it says, ow, come help me, I'm here, right? I'm hurt, I've fallen, I can't get up, whatever. And it drops your exact location down to whatever it is, 3 meters accuracy. This is probably one of the best little devices for that, prepare for the worst and hope for the best kind of scenarios, whether it's disaster or accident in the urban areas, like if you have the earthquake or whatever, and I want to tell my wife, hey, I survived the Great Quake of 2018 or 2025 or whatever it is. Or if cell towers go down, if there's a lot of cellular congestion, everybody's trying to call each other all at the same time, it doesn't matter. I can bypass all that and push a button and say, hey, I'm okay, and this is where I'm at. Or I can actually send a text message with more details and my location. If I'm hunting or fishing or flying or boating or training or whatever I'm doing, I can set it to drop pins every 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 2 minutes, however many minutes I want it apart. I can have them drop, and so they can follow my progress wherever they go. It's only $199 with no activation fees. Plans as low as $14 a month. That's for the minimum, what I like to call the safety plan. I got one for my wife so she can put it in her glove box. And then on $14 a month, if she doesn't use it, which she probably won't ever unless there's an emergency, then those minutes will roll, or those credits will roll over. And she'll have a big bulk of credits to use whenever we need to. And at that point, that doesn't matter. It's cheap insurance. $199 a month and $14, or $199 for the unit and $14 a month. That's cheap insurance, as far as I'm concerned. So it doesn't matter if you are, if you have a car or boat or an ATV or plane, a snow machine, a train, a submarine. Doesn't matter what it is. You should have one of these on board because it will give you that peace of mind, and more importantly, your loved ones, the peace of mind of knowing that they can find you or reach out to you at any time. Because if it's connected, they can send messages back to you from wherever they're at to wherever you are. So check out the Bivy Stick. Go to satellitewest.com, get the details, or you can go actually put one in your hands, hands-on. You can go down to Homer at South Central Radar on the Spit. Safe and Sound in Wasilla, or Safe and Sound in Soldotna, or Safe and Sound in Anchorage. You can go to Radar Alaska in Kodiak, Communications North in Seward, Lundy Marine Electronics in Dutch Harbor, or up in Fairbanks. You can go by your local Arctic Fire and Safety and see the crew there. And they will put one in your hands that you can check out. Again, only $199. I mean, it's cheap to turn your cell phone into that magical, mystical satellite communications device. Thank you to Bivy Stick and to Satellite West for sponsoring the program. Okay, phone line to call if you want to dial into the Pivotel call-in line this morning is at 907-433-3150, 907-433-3150. Chris Story will be joining us in a few moments. But let me go back to what we were just talking about before Brad Keithley, which is the 2022 special congressional race. And I guess one of the people that I didn't mention in the story was one I mentioned the other day, which was Josh Revak. Right? So Josh Revak is being rumored right now. Josh Revak is being rumored by, I guess, the landmine, or being reported by the landmine that he's in like Flynn. He's already going to run. And so you got Josh Revak, and now John Coghill, and Nick Begich III. Those will be the three big Republican names. And now you've got Chris Constant, and now you've got Al Gross, who wants to run. Yesterday I mentioned the gentleman from he's the gardening reporter on the ADN. He is he's a potential as well, and I apologize, I've forgotten his name right this hot second. But yeah, he's also Andrew Halcrow, Tara Sweeney, What's this guy's name? Oh, Chris Tuck is talked about as well. Jeff Lowenfels is the writer for the ADN, and then of course Sarah Palin. These are all people that have talked about it in one way or the other. But we know for sure that John Coghill and Al Gross are going to be running. We know that Constance and Begich are going to be in there. This is going to be a real test of that first jungle primary, which, of course, you'll remember now, is a full mail-in primary. There is going to be no in-person. There's going to be no regular, which immediately is going to send a lot of people up into a tailspin because, that's how they manipulate it, and that's how they stole the election, and that's how... I agree. I have some concerns. I don't agree with all of what you're saying, but I have some concerns about all this kind of stuff. And, that's why when I get my ballots for the jungle primary, I will be collecting all the ballots in my house at once, and I will be walking them down to the office. Now, that doesn't allay all my concerns, obviously, because it has to get into the secure ballot location to be counted and everything else, but it's better than dropping it in my mailbox. It's pretty crazy. Rob Myers just said in the chat room, you heard it here first. I'm not running for Congress. I did have to say I scratched my head for a second when I read one of the names, and I thought, is that no, that's J.R. Myers, not Rob Myers. So J.R. Myers, Stephen Wright, Robert Bob Lyons, Bill Hibbler III, Greg Brailsford. Those are all people who've already filed for the special primary, plus everybody else that I just mentioned. I mean, there's, what is that, 15 names right there? 15 names right off the top? It's the Bear Doctor. You know, what I think is most interesting in this is watching what's happening with the Democratic candidates. Because I think with the entry of Dr. Al Gross, as much as we may mock him, and as much as we may think that he's not a great candidate, he's got the name recognition over Chris Constance. I mean, Chris Constance has got to be kind of gnashing his teeth a little bit here because he may not even make the top four in the jungle primary. Not with Josh Revak and Begich and Coghill in there. And if Palin jumps in on top of it, and then if Chris Tuck gets in, I mean, I just don't see. I mean, Al Gross spent whatever he spent. What did he spend on? I think it was Mustread that had the total amount. I was a little giggly about this. Al Gross spent $19 million. $19 million in 2020. And then had the Lincoln Project, another independent PAC, spend tens of millions of dollars more. He got 146,000 Alaskan votes, which puts him definitely as a strong contender for the final four in a primary. Because, the Democrats got to vote for somebody, right? So do they vote for Al Gross, the name they know, or do they vote for Chris Constance, who's only known really around the Anchorage area? This is, it's going to be... It's going to be, and then if you drop Chris Tuck into the middle of that, ooh, baby. So, yeah, I mean, things are about to get real around here. It's going to be super interesting. I can't wait to see what happens. But we'll be watching from the sidelines with the popcorn. I guarantee you, big buttered popcorn with a little bit of Johnny's seasoned salt on it, because that's the best way to eat it. But that's how we'll be watching it as we go forward. Okay. We got more coming up. Chris Story is going to join us here in a minute. And we'll keep moving on. Maybe we'll take some more calls here at the end of the show. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Your home for common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. The Michael Duke Show. Back with more right after this.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio.
Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Okay. What does it cost a human to add their name to the ballot? I don't know. Probably a couple $100. Probably. I don't know. I've never looked into it. I've never cared enough to look into it. But I imagine it's probably a couple $100, something like that. Jimmy says he's got a good-sized tax return coming. I'll have an extra $150 to $200 for entry fees. Gail says perhaps we should list who isn't running. I mean, that might be easier at this point. I mean, this will be the first jungle primary, and we've got until Friday. So, well, let's count the names, shall we? So we got John Coghill and Al Gross. That's two. That's two who's going to be there. Then we've got Constance and Begich. That's 4. Bresselfer's 5. Lyons is 6. Myers is 7. Wright is 8. Right? And then we've got the potential of Tuck would make 9. Palin would make 10. Revak would make 11. And Lowenfeld would make 12. Who else were they talking about there? Oh, Halcrow would make 13. Did I add Revak already? I think I did. 14, they say. So here we got 13 or 14 potentials coming in for this race already, and the week's not even, I mean, the week is the end at this point. So it should be it should be an interesting race. I mean, you know, the guy that I think is really the most ambitious at this point is Hal Crow. I mean, God love him. I mean, he does a political blog. He does a political blog for the ADN podcast. I'm sorry, not a political blog, but a political podcast for the ADN. But I mean, who's listening to it? Yeah. So I think that's a little ambitious of him. And as I said before, I think Palin is basically just flirting with the idea to make sure that she gets her name in the news. I don't think she really has an interest in running for anything like that. Do you? I mean, I don't think so. But anyway, so potentially, Tara Sweeney, I forgot, or not, yeah, is that right? Yeah, Tara Sweeney. So she is also, so that'd be 14. 14. Oof. Oh man. So I guess we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with that. But 14 potential candidates. I can't wait to see how that shows up. Dwayne in the chat room just said, first I've ever heard of it, an ADN podcast. Bet that's a circus. Well, it's run by Andrew Halcrow. Speaking of the ringleader of the circus, yeah. I mean, Halcrow has had some good ideas over the years, but he's gotten, over the last, I would say probably over the last 5 years, he's gotten weird. I mean, he really has. He ran in 2006, I think, that Halcrow ran for governor as an independent. Or did he run? Yeah, he ran for governor as an independent. And he seemed pretty straightforward at that point. But then, like, I talked to him about 10 years later, and he was like, no, the guy was wackadoo. Wackadoo. All right, maxing out at 20? No, there is no maximum, Heather. That's what it is. It is what it is. When and how do we overturn our ranked choice voting? Again, asking for well, the legislature can change it at any time. Or you can raise $5 or $6 million and do another ballot measure that repeals it. That's pretty much what it's going to take, I think, right now. All right, Chris Story, the man from Homer, joins us on the line. Hello, my friend. How are you? Chris. Oh, boy. Chris, are you there? Okay, so we'll hang up, and hopefully Chris will call back here in just a hot second, and we'll actually be able to hear him. We'll see what goes on here. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense, Liberty Base, Free Thinking Radio. Don't forget to share the show, like this video, and we'll see what Chris has to say. You there, Chris? No, Chris are you there? Something's going on with Chris's phone. Try another phone. Here we go. All right, welcome back to the program. Continuing now with our guru of positivity, the life coach extraordinaire, the man, the myth, the legend in his own mind. It is my friend, the one, the only, Chris Story. Are you with us, Chris? Can you actually hear us now? No, I can hear Chris. Apparently, Chris can hear us, but we can't hear him. I'm going to try and call. I guess I'm going to try and call Chris back. That's weird. I don't know what the challenge is, but we're going to try and get a hold of Chris here, and we will try this out right now live on the air, because we are radio professionals and we can make all this happen. And so we'll reach out to Chris and see if we can get him on the phone real quick and start our weekly life coaching lesson. And we'll start off with Chris Story. Are you there, Chris? I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Hello, my friend.
Michael Dukes.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. Are we having a little technical difficulty?
Yeah, I don't know.
We still go to prom.
You could hear me, and or you could hear the music, and apparently you couldn't hear me, so that's fine. Hey, good morning, my friend. How are you doing? All technical difficulties aside, what's going on? What's happening in your world?
Everything's good. I got to tell you, it's been it's funny because for my own program later today, I was going to be quoting Will Smith, something I'd read in Success Magazine a few months ago that he had said. And now, of course, I have to second guess. Do I? Because I don't want to engage in pop culture. You know that. But I might have to quote him anyway. But today I wanted to talk to you about Jim Rohn's 7 B-Butts of leadership. So we can go wherever you want to, Michael. I'm putty in your hands.
Did you just say 7 B-Bops of leadership?
B-Butts.
B-Butts. Okay. Because I'm like, B-Bops? Really? I mean, the B-Bops?
I like B-Butts of leadership, and I cannot lie.
That's right. Some other brothers can deny, but not us. All right. All right, Jim.
I don't know. Is that okay?
What? Butts? We said butts. I fish for halibuts all the time. It's fine. It'll be great. All right. Well, good. I mean, you're here to coach us, Coach. So Jim Rohn's 7 B-Butts of life.
Leadership. Yeah. And leadership is on my mind a lot. The more I watch the leaders of our free world, nationally and internationally, I just think we can't focus enough on leadership in our own life, because I think we've ceded the ground of leadership to those elected, those in authority with their positions at your place of work or in life, or again, elected leaders are kind of what I think we've ceded too much ground to them. And I think it's important to focus on leadership in our own life and what we can do relative to the leadership that we have, the ability we have to lead right where we are with what we've got. So I've been reading a lot of Jim Rohn lately. He was a business philosopher, but also a philosopher of life and self-improvement and self-interest and self-governance of your own life. And probably one of the strongest voices of personal responsibility that ever crisscrossed the country, teaching and speaking. And so he came up with these 7, I call them B-Butts. He called them 7 principles of leadership. But you'll understand why I'm calling them B-Butts, which I think is just going to stick in your mind like a piece of chewing gum when you hear them. So the first B-Butt of leadership is be strong, but not rude. And I think that this age of toxic masculinity, and I'm using air quotes that you can't see, or this concept that somebody is just rude because they have strength, inner strength, and confidence in themselves. Now that can be confused sometimes with being rude, and I think it's something that we should all embrace in our own life, is that we can be strong in knowing our position, and that doesn't mean we have to be rude. And I think the solution to that is to literally state your position and then listen. Be willing to listen to somebody else, but state your position and know your ground.
Is that the difference between confidence and arrogance?
It gets confused. It gets confusing. I think knowing the language and knowing where you're coming from. Strength is in, I think, a reserve. I'm not coming out with all guns blazing, but there is strength in knowing what you're talking about. And if you don't, then it's okay. And I don't think it's a sign of weakness to admit, I don't know. but I'm going to be strong in that position that I have principles that I'm going to adhere to in my life, but I'm not going to be rude about it. I think there's a difference between the two, and I think listening is that key difference. I really do. I was approached by a liberal acquaintance the other day who said to me that he really appreciated my radio program because he said, I don't think we get everything when we only listen to the left. I don't think we have a full understanding. And if we only listen to the right, I don't think we have a full understanding. He goes, I really appreciate what you've said and how you've helped me understand some of these other issues. I found that to be incredibly strong. He was willing to say, look, I have my principles, but I'm listening to you, and you're having some influence or at least helping me understand. So I think that's strength, but not being rude. And the second B-but is be kind, but not weak. And you see, these all link together. So when you think about leadership, you do want a kindly person or somebody who has compassion, empathy, if not sympathy, at least empathy for others. But that better never be actually conflated with weakness.
Right.
Because weakness is something altogether different. And when you are a weak leader, you're actually harming the people that are behind you, that are self-proclaimed followers or followers by circumstance or proximity. It doesn't matter. If you're weak, then you're actually doing a disservice. So you can be strong but not rude, and kind but not weak. And I think, again, this is why language is so important, that we understand the difference between these words.
It's the balance, right? I mean, you've got to find that happy medium of being strong without. And it seems like rudeness is the way of the day. I mean, like, we see it on social media. People aren't just disagreeing; they're trying to, verbally eviscerate people. And again, being strong in your convictions or strong in your beliefs without being, or kind in your beliefs without being weak. You don't want to be walked over. And it seems like everything on social media is reinforcing all the wrong sides. They're reinforcing all the butts on the B-but scale, so to speak.
Absolutely. And the third B-but of leadership is be bold, but not a bully. And again, all of these things tie together and have commonality, but they do make distinct different points. And so to be bold is to be able to speak your mind. Use your First Amendment freedom of speech, be it in public, the public square, which today is social media, or in newsprint for those that are still writing into the newspaper or what have you, or just speaking in a conversation or speaking out if you were to attend a rally and feel comfortable to speak out, whatever. But be bold but not a bully. And I think that all comes back to my first point about listening, being willing to listen. So being bold doesn't necessarily mean you're going to bowl over somebody else. You can listen to them, and in so doing, learn what it is they're actually trying to say and get to the bottom of it. And then, again, be bold on your own principles. Never do you have to cede the ground to your principles, but you might actually learn something if you don't bully somebody. You might actually ask clarifying questions. Say, okay, I'm staunch conservative, and I hear what you're saying. Help me understand. What does it mean to go into a place of universal basic income when, and then have the conversation? But be bold in your own principles, but don't bully the other person, because you're not leading at that point. Okay. And the fourth B-but of leadership, according to Jim Rohn, is to be humble but not timid. Be humble but not timid. I mean, look, I may not know everything about this, but I'm going to tell you what I think, and without timidity. I'm going to speak my mind. And I think there's nothing more satisfying than having spoken your mind. There's nothing more frustrating than leaving the scene of a discussion and going, I should have said, oh, I can't believe I didn't think of that. So be humble in your approach, but not timid. Be bold, but not a bully.
Right.
Kind, but not weak. Strong, but not rude. We're making our way down to number 7, Michael. This is exciting.
All right. Well, no, this is my whole radio show. I mean, this really is the things that I try to live by the radio. It's one of the things, like, I've always wanted more people to come from the left. I'm not really ever really beating people up or ad hominem attacking people. I may take issues with their principles or with their philosophies or certain issues, but I mean, this is you're hitting right in the game of where I'm striving to be. So I'm excited to hear what the next B-but is.
It's exciting to hear you forget how many pejoratives you've used against me, but that's okay. Let's move on. I forgive you, Michael. All right, the fifth B-but of leadership is be thoughtful but not lazy. And I think that there's sometimes when somebody's thoughtful in their approach or reproach of somebody else, or they really want to think about something and you think, are they slow? Why doesn't this person speak up? What is going on here? No, thoughtful. So it's sort of the think twice, speak once, maybe would be a great way to think about that, but not confuse it with, lethargy and just, I'll get around to that later, or I'll respond later. I like that. So be thoughtful, but not lazy. So that means we have to be active in leadership. It's an active position. And I don't think we have a choice today. If you watched any of the presidents speaking in Poland, and you watch if you're even mildly aware of what's happening in the world and our position in the world, and everything from modern monetary policy to what has led to this inflation, what has led to the precipice of World War III, and our culpability and our involvement and inculcation and everything that's happened in Ukraine leading up to this moment in time, if you don't recognize that it's time for you to lead where you are with what you've got, you might fall into this category of being thoughtful versus lazy. And that's
right.
My thought here is we need to really understand leadership as it pertains to us, the individual, right now, quickly.
Well, and how much is laziness and how much is apathy? Or how much is just frustration of throwing our hands into the air? Maybe it's not laziness, it's be thoughtful, but maybe it should be diligent, instead of don't be lazy. Because sometimes it's not laziness, it's just like, ugh, I can't do it anymore.
And that's okay. Maybe you're not the one that's supposed to run around with the acid reflux and pulling your hair out and making decisions as to whether to push the red button or not. No, that's not within your hands. And definitely moderate your stress level, of course. But leadership means being aware. And then I think the whole thoughtful versus laziness is, do be thinking about it. What do you think about what's happened? I asked Senator Sullivan the other day on my radio show when I interviewed him about the biolabs and these labs that are in Ukraine. I'm very concerned about them. I'm very concerned about our role in having housed or warehoused or studied pathogens and different things there. I really want to know. And so I'm thoughtful about it. I'm not attacking him or our country over it, but I want to know about it. And so I'm going to continue to look into it. I'm going to continue to ask the hard questions, but I'm certainly not going to destroy my own gut over it with stress.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
There's only so much I can do.
Okay.
And then the sixth B-but of leadership, according to Jim Rohn, is to be proud but not arrogant. And this ties into your exact it's almost, you could see the future. It's what you were talking about a moment ago about this arrogance idea. And I think pride versus arrogance. I think when you heard Barack Hussein Obama say that a lot of countries think they're the best country, America's not the best country. I mean, a lot of people think that there's exceptionalism in their country, and Ethiopian is exceptionalism, etc. And I think the idea of being proud of our country and arrogant get conflated too often. And this is,
right.
Pride of a leader, pride of somebody that's actually maybe really worked hard to get where they are. And I think our country has. We've been an exemplar of having to work for what we've got in this country, from everybody from carving slavery out of our country and taking that thread out of the fabric of this nation and still fighting, civil rights and racism, et cetera. I think that's all part and parcel. I am proud of this country. But I especially probably could confuse that with arrogance once in a while. But I think when we're leading, it's powerful to be prideful, and arrogance can actually take us off track.
Right, absolutely. That leads us up to the seventh B-but according to Jim Rohn.
And this is one that I struggle with the most, Michael, and that's to be funny but not a fool. Be funny but not a fool. And, it's like there's a fine line, but I think humor in life, I think we can't take ourselves too seriously as leaders. And I think we need to have some sense of humor, especially self-deprecating humor, but don't play the fool because nobody will follow you.
I've been known to walk that line a time or two.
Blur that line.
I've been known to smudge that thing just a little bit. I think the one that's hardest, quite honestly, is the confidence, the confidence line, which was number one. And again, that pride, be proud but not arrogant. And I think that confidence has a tendency in some people to bleed into arrogance as well. And it's not maybe it's not even confidence. Maybe it's a false pride that they're seeing instead. But These are all things that are good. I think these are all things that, you've got to find somebody who's well-rounded in all 7 of these. And you'll be able to make your points heard, I think. I think you can make a difference if you can master all 7 of those positions. It'll make you a great salesperson, but it'll also make you, I think, a better person to be able to get your point across.
And I think that's, if you just go back to Ronald Reagan's era for just a moment and think about the idea of what he actually did. He sold America to Americans. Not only did he sell America, the idea and the idealism of America to Americans, he sold it to the world. And when he said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, that was a sales pitch like none other. And that's really confidence. That is leadership. It was powerful, not boastful, but incredibly proud of his country and what we've become. And I think when you listen to words like Bono, say, from Ireland, and he has said that America is an idea, and there's a bit of America in the entire world, that idea of freedom and democracy and true liberty born into each person and protected by the Constitution, but not given by a sovereign leader to us. It's definitely inalienable rights that we're born with. You hear other people describe this idea of America, and you realize, oh, yes, we should be incredibly proud of this country and the idea of America, and that is our greatest export.
I think you're right on. With that. We're about to wrap up here, Chris. You were just talking about Ukraine and the biolabs and everything else. You got thoughts on this beyond this that you want to explore, or should we bring you back next week to talk about something like that?
Oh, I'll hang out. If you've got another few minutes, I'll hang out with you.
All right, well, let's hang out for a minute because I think this is interesting. We're getting word today that Moscow appears to be pulling back some of their forces from Kiev, and people are wondering, basically this was predicted here a few days ago because of supply line issues and everything else, but it does leave me some questions as to where do we think it goes from here and some of the things we're hearing about. So I want to get your take on it because I believe you're a reasonable guy. I mean, I hate to say that in front of you and everything, but I believe you're a reasonable guy, and I'd like to get your hot take on this. So don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. Chris Story is our guest. We will continue with more right after these messages. Don't go anywhere.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're running late there. In the break with Chris Story right now, talking about stuff. I got a call the other day, Chris. This is the second time, I think, in a week that this gentleman has called. He listens to Firearms Friday from Las Vegas, but he has called in twice now to tell us that Putin is actually rooting out the New World Order and the I think he said it was the Jew World Order, if I'm not mistaken. And that he is the one that's actually saving us from all the one-worlders and everything else, and that if we just knew about the Nazi brigades and everything, which apparently this is a person who's called in the past and been fairly straightforward and conservative, but I've seen these kind of ideas and memes going on. How do you reconcile that when you talk to people? I'm assuming that you've run into this.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that to begin with before we get into some of the other details of Ukraine?
Well, think about our previous segment there on leadership and the fact that when you look at the leadership that we have all the way back to George Herbert Walker Bush signing on to the United Nations Agenda 21 for quite a while, and that was back in 1990, 91 when he signed on to that in Rio de Janeiro during their UN meeting. You'd think, well, that's a bit kooky, tinfoil hatty to think in terms of that there's going to be any efforts to actually create this communitarianism that people warned about, with bringing the top down and the bottom up to this, sort of meet in the middle where no one has too much and no one has too little, almost an idyllic version of communism, or at least the aims towards which Marx had hoped to achieve. And of course, it's impossible without totalitarianism leading to that ubiquitous nirvana on Earth. It isn't going
Right.
to happen. It has to be done at the point of tip of a spear and the point of a gun. And I just think in terms of, I don't doubt anything right now inside of this vacuum of leadership. We have a complete vacuum of leadership in this country, in the United States of America. We don't have it in the Senate. We don't have it in the Supreme Court. We don't have it in the executive branch or the House of Representatives. We have a vacuum of leadership and people that are filling, speaking of vacuums, they're using a Hoover to vacuum up as much money and power that they can. And so I think that right now, when you have this vacuum of leadership, conspiracies like what just mentioned there, that Putin's actually a savior of sorts. Yes, I am hearing from listeners also who are suggesting that. And I think with Putin, you have somebody who glorifies the old days of his KGB and his Soviet reign. I think that's what he actually wants. And he's collaborating with China. I mean,
right.
What more directional towards one world order can you get there?
This is almost this is like Clausewitz all over. I mean, you have to create the national boogeyman for the nation to rally behind. And in this case, they had to rally behind the fear of Nazis. I mean, obviously, the Russians felt the sting of the Nazi machine much deeper than anybody here in the United States, because they faced them right on their doorstep, and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of Russian citizens and civilians and soldiers were killed. And so it is the boogeyman in their backyard that they can remember. And so it has to be something that's ginned up in that regard. And I guess that
I do think we are headed towards, I think there is a conglomeration, there is a majority stakeholder group from Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum on down to do want a singular governance and singular world order.
Well, yeah, I would not
to be new made.
It's not to say that I don't think Putin is pushing back on that kind of one world ideology, but the thing that gets me is that then people say, and he's doing it because he, for like these humanitarian reasons, right, or, these philanthropic reasons. And the bottom line is, no, what he wants is he wants to create a new imperial Russia, or a new, right, relive the glory of the Soviet Union, as you talked about earlier. And I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that he is, fundamentally against a one world order, as long as he's in charge, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, 100% agreed. And I think, to mistake him as some sort of a messianic character that's, or, George General Patton, or, anything like that. Nope, this guy is, there's a reason he waited for the weakness of a Biden administration to do what he's doing. There's a reason he didn't do this in 2017, or 2017, or 2018, or 2019. He waited for his opportune time, not to reset our lives and make our lives less headed towards the one world order, but just really, as you said, I think it's the recreation of the Soviet Union, the empire in his mind. He wants to be at the head of that.
Well, and I think in some ways he bought his own press, and I think that has come back to bite him at this case as well. But we're 20 seconds out, so we'll rejoin it. And I don't normally dabble in the geopolitics region, but I'm interested to hear what Chris has to say about this. So we'll get his take on it, and it'll be an interesting discussion. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like and share this video. Like and follow the show page. Here we go. Okay, welcome back to the program. Continuing, Chris Story, who normally just gives us kind of our uplift. He did a great job with the 7 B-butts of leadership from Jim Rohn. But I asked him to stay because he mentioned in passing something about Ukraine. Now, as I just told the listening audience during the break, that I'm not huge on geopolitics. I mean, I do follow some things because they interest me, but I don't generally cover them on the program unless they're in basic broad strokes. But I find some interesting things happening. We were just talking about this theory that I keep seeing in some circles on the right about how Putin is somehow some kind of messianic savior who, through philanthropic reasons, is trying to stop a one world or new world order or one world government or whatever, and that makes him a savior. And all I can help the thinking is that here's a guy who's an authoritarian, he's really a dictator is what he is, an authoritarian. And the only reason I think he's trying to stop any kind of increasing of one world or one, worldwide organization is because he's not the head of it. But Chris has mentioned some other things too, including the biolabs, which we've seen some evidence that there were biolabs in there that had been funded in part by the U.S. There's some question as to what they were working on and whether or not that stuff is secure. We just saw this morning or yesterday that they were reporting that Chernobyl, some of the diagnostic isotopes that they use for calibrating their equipment and some of the raw waste from Chernobyl has gone missing, and there's concerns about dirty bombs. And then we hear now the Russians are pulling back from Kiev, whether that's the supply line issue finally catching up or maybe there's something bigger afoot. I don't know. Chris joins us now to kind of discuss that. So, Chris, wherever you want to start, I mean, if you want to start on the biolabs, what was Senator Sullivan's answer when you asked him specifically about the biolabs in Ukraine?
I don't want to say obfuscated the question, but it really was not touched on. So it didn't go there. It didn't really want to discuss it, and I didn't push the point. Having him as a guest, it's difficult enough to get a hold of the senator. Didn't certainly want to push the point on that because he may not be looped in or he may not be able to speak to it. I know one thing he said was very frustrating is that because I had congratulated him on his pressing of, Austin and Milley and Blinken relative to how we withdrew from Afghanistan and that he was really holding their feet to the fire publicly. Right. And I celebrated that. And he said they just concluded the week prior to my conversation with him, a closed door, confidential session that they couldn't allow the public in. And he was questioning, or they wouldn't allow the public into the Senate hearing. And he said, why aren't the cameras here? Why isn't the public here? And I think so. He's definitely coming from the right place, but I'm not sure that, in that moment, that question was going to be answered. My bigger concern is with leadership in respect to what we were talking about before, individually, we need to be thoughtful and strong and bold and questioning and listening and researching all of these things so we can be influencing the people that are having a great going to be influencing the outcome of this, because there is no doubt in my mind, as soon as I heard Marco Rubio asking the question and getting sort of a surprise answer, well, yes, we do have secured labs there. Like, wait a minute. All of that flashed through my mind about Burisma, Hunter Biden's connections to Burisma, the president of Ukraine currently having been foisted to power in part by an oligarch of Ukraine who is very involved with Burisma himself, if not on the board, he's president. He's very high up in that organization. And then you start to think about Vice President Biden suggesting that he got a prosecutor fired for looking into Burisma by withholding $1 billion of loan guarantees to that country of Ukraine. You think we have been meddling with and mixing with since 91, 92, we have been involved in Ukraine, and undoubtedly, somebody said, well, why would you put a biolab? Why would you do that kind of research in Ukraine, for God's sake? Because it is a completely corrupt place where we could buy our way in, or at least we're helping you secure these labs. Well, what takes 30 years to secure and destroy, or make secure these biolabs? And maybe the passengers win it. No, right. I don't believe it for a second. I think we're up to our elbows in it. And I'm almost finished reading The Real Anthony Fauci by Robert Kennedy Jr. And if you think of him, whatever you want to, he's been, since 2005, basically cast aside from the liberal left, whom he used to be a hero of, once he started looking into vaccines. This book isn't just about the vaccines relative to COVID-19. The Real Anthony Fauci lays out the facts wide open. It's the most footnoted book I've ever read. We are up to our eyeballs in research abroad and in this country that would keep us up at night if we knew what we were doing. Anthony Fauci himself has pointed $895 billion in whatever direction he sees fit. That's almost $1 trillion over his career that he has funded whatever it is that he wants to see come to light or not come to light. He can squash it. We have been so involved in the Wuhan laboratory. That is we have fingerprints on that. I asked an attorney friend of mine if he ever thought we'd be seeing a class action suit because of our involvement, U.S. involvement in that lab. I think we just need to wake up and be bold, be brave, and say, you know what, we may have our fingers in the pie over there, and we may need to own this.
I mean, so far we basically, and you're right, we have meddled in Ukraine. We've used Ukraine as a stalking horse for years against Russia with the threat of joining the EU or joining NATO. We've dangled that out there for many years, even though from the Treaty of Belarus, we said we wouldn't. And so we are definitely partially to blame for what's going on here because, again, we continued to dangle that Ukrainian question in front of them. I'm not justifying, I'm saying it just added to the angst and the tension. But now that it's happened, and we've seen that the Russian machine has smashed its might on the will of the Ukrainian people, who have fought back like, I mean, honey badgers and wolverines. It's like, it's amazing. But we've been giving aid and doing some of these other things. Do you think we're doing the right thing? We got about 2 minutes here.
Of course, trying to push Putin back, of course. But I think we need to come back to the root of it rather than, okay, that's a conversation that needs to be had. Are we doing the right thing currently? Let's look back and think, when we put Biden in office, we began, I think, the countdown clock to the invasion of Ukraine. Just like when Putin took back Crimea in 2014 in the Obama years. And Biden said it. As soon as we elected President Obama, he said, they're going to test him. They're going to test him. Well, the world's going to test him. And they did. And once Biden got into office. So I think if we look at nothing else in those last 30 seconds we've got here, is consequences from elections will prolong the suffering of the world. And I think that's where we need to come back and have a real come to Jesus moment here in America. What are we going to do? And are you going to be a leader in your life right now with the situation we have on the ground here, which is a president who is not mentally fit and he's dangerous? And so to me, I think that's what we can have the most influence on right now. I hope we're not prolonging the suffering of the Ukrainians by handing them shotguns and pistols and rocket launchers. I hope that we're not prolonging that suffering, but I'm more concerned about our own president right now.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this, and of course, Russian expansionism with Georgia and Belarus, and of course, Donetsk and some of the other Crimean breakaways and everything. It's going to be interesting to see where this all comes out, and we'll be looking back and picking this apart, I'm sure, for years. Thank you, my friend. It's good to hear from you, and thank you for being part of the program today.
Thank you for your leadership in the world, Michael.
Appreciate it, my friend. Out of time, folks. Well, that does it. It's interesting to see all of this stuff kind of break down. I find it fascinating. The war component of it is, well, anyway. All right, we're out of time. We got to go. Got to go. Appreciate you guys being part of it. And we will see you tomorrow. Kelly Shabaka, Mike Shower will be our guest. The Michael Duke Show. The Common Sense Radio.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.